Thank you.
Brilliant. Can everyone hear me? Yep, excellent. Just like to say this is my first Elag and I'm really happy to be here, especially seeing that it's in the lovely city of Bath, so thanks for inviting me. I'll just mention who I am. I appreciate that first of all Ali Conti's name was in the programme first of all, and Ali would have loved to have been here, but he's left the British Library now and he's moved to a new job in America, so I'm afraid to say you've got me instead, but I will do the best I can. So I thought I'd start with this picture, of a sculpture with all these books kind of tumbling waterfall style out of a window. And I found a really nice quote that seems to go with this picture. So, reading individual works is as irrelevant as describing the architecture of a building from a single brick, or the layout of a city from a single church. And this quote is from Franco Moretti at Stanford University, and really it captures much of what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. In the digital world, it's more looking at the whole of collections and how we can use data sets and think about using library collections in new ways, not just individual items. So, I'm sure if many of you have seen other British Library speakers, you might have seen this picture before. This is our standard photo of book digitisation. So when thinking of our vast collections, at the British Library we often say we've got 150 million items, but we've been using that statistic for the last 10 years. So to be perfectly honest, the British Library's collections are so vast, with so many thousands of items arriving each week. They're in the hundreds of millions, and it's growing all the time, so we can just estimate, but doing increasingly more digitisation, but also collecting more and more born digital content. So I've just got a slide here about personal digital archives. My colleague Jeremy Johns, he's our e-manuscripts curator, so we're taking in the archives of authors and scientists and important people, and for a long time obviously we've been taking in manuscript archives, but increasingly these are now hybrid archives, and as we go forwards into the future they'll become mostly 100% born digital. So we've got the challenge of preserving emails, we've taken in the Wendy Cope email archive, we've got the challenge of preserving Word documents and being able to allow researchers to work with this content but without tampering it in many ways, and Jeremy is using methodology from the forensics community to work with this content. I thought I should also mention the UK Web Archive. We've been collecting websites since 2004, and since last year the UK changed legislation so that instead of archiving websites on a permissions basis, where we'd ask each site owner for permission to archive their site, with the new legislation that came in last year, we can hoover up the entire UK domain, and we're now doing that twice a year. You might wonder why I've got an image of the Conservative Party website here. Last year there was a news story in the UK. The Conservative Party had deleted their speech archive from their website, but even more crafty than that, they'd set a script running so that it would delete back files, and so very quickly both the British Library's Web Archive and I think a few other web archives around the world were the only places that had got evidence of the speech archive of the Conservative Party, including some speeches by David Cameron about safeguarding the NHS. So and then journalists are able to use the Web Archive. So if the powers that be or anywhere else try to say something hasn't existed and think they can delete it from the web, well, we've got the UK Web Archive and it's all in there, and we're not deleting any of it. And at the moment with the Legal Deposit Archive you have to come to the British Library's premises to come and access the Web Archive on site, but with the permissions-based archive and the Conservative Party website, I must say, they gave us permission to archive their site, so this is available on the British Library's website, and you can go back using the time bar are to see how it's changed over time. So sometimes people, you mentioned web archiving, especially to members of the public, and some people think, oh, you're joking, right? Who would want to archive the web? But when you get stories like this where information is being attempted to be deleted, you see how increasingly important that resource is. So, thinking outside the British Library for a moment, we understand, obviously in the world that we're in, we need to look at what researchers are doing and changes in methodologies so that we can change our services to meet the needs of researchers. So I appreciate I'm probably speaking to an audience who knows this off by heart, but bear with me. So obviously more and more digital content, both the digitised and the born digital, lots more cross-disciplinary working, lots more collaborative working, very much data-driven research, and not just in the sciences and social sciences, but also in the humanities and the arts, and lots of repurposing of content. So I won't focus too much on these text slides, because it really irritates me when people read from the slides when I go to conferences, so I'll try not to do too much of the same. So really, at the British Library, in the team I'm in, we're interested in how we can get researchers doing innovative research with our content. So I'm not in the part of the library that's digitising, and I'm not in the part of the library doing the digital preservation. We're very much interested in working with researchers and trying to provide infrastructure to allow them to use the digital tools that they're building on our content. And we wanted to learn from this. I thought I'd mention the library's strategy and vision. So we've got 5 key points. So everything that we do at the British Library has to fit with our strategic priorities. And I appreciate they only go up to next year, 2015. So we're currently working on our new strategy at the moment, which will be called BL2014, and there will be some communications later in the year. But our current 5 priorities are to guarantee access for future generations, enable access to everyone who wants to do research, support research communities in key areas for social and economic benefit, enrich the cultural life of the nation, and lead and collaborate in growing the world's knowledge base. So the library is now really seeing ourselves as a hub in a global information network, and we're very keen on working with partners and other institutions to provide our services. So as I mentioned, we've been digitising for a long time, for the last 2 decades or more, and we can now do a lot more with that content. And so we're now thinking of what can we do at scale. And I know on Friday my colleague Ben Osteen is talking about the mechanical curator and the Flickr Commons work that we've been doing. So I will not linger on this, but my talk today I was going to focus on 4 areas. So first of all, I will talk a little about what we're collecting, what we're connecting to. I will also talk a bit about tools and services. So not just the tools that we're building in the British Library, but also tools that people are building outside. And that will link nicely into what I mentioned about British Library Labs, where we're holding competitions for people to develop tools and work on projects with our content. Engagement, so really thinking about outreach projects and engaging new audiences. We do a lot of this. We go and work with digital and humanities departments out and about in the UK, and I'm also going to talk about a competition that I've been running called Off the Map, where I've been working with video game design students and getting them to use British Library content to create video games. And also I'll talk a bit about skills, because in the team I'm in, we don't want to be seen as you guys are the digital department and everyone else to carry on thinking that they can be analogue. So I don't do this alone. So the digital research team, I've put some photos up here. You may know some of my colleagues from Twitter and other social media. So Ben Osteen and Mahendra, they work in British Library Labs. Mahendra used to work at UConn here at Bath, so I know he knows many of the staff here. We've got Nora McGregor and James Baker and Achilles. We're the digital curators, and we're all on Twitter, so feel free to follow us and see what we're up to. One of the things that we instigated, I should mention that the team was set up in October 2010, so before then digital scholarship didn't exist, but the library acknowledged that to make progress in this area it really had to have a dedicated team, if not permanently but for a transition period to achieve some changes. And then in 2012 we launched a training programme for our colleagues where we set up 15 one-day courses to basically to offer to our colleagues across the organisation. We made them very hands-on, and we've now got a bank of laptops so we can go and set up our courses anywhere on site and train people on different topics. So I've just put a list of these. Some of them seem quite basic, but when we got out and about meeting our colleagues in different departments, we soon became aware that skill levels were quite varied across the organisation, and we realised that we might have to start off quite gently, because there were some people across the library that even if you mentioned blogging and Twitter to them, kind of hands would go up in horror and think, oh, I'm a bit scared of this like new world of social media. So we had one course on social media, introduction to Twitter and blogging, but all sorts of things, everything from metadata, text encoding, crowdsourcing, data visualization, and this really is just the start. At the moment we're running these courses twice a year, but once we know some are more popular than others, we're keeping the programme fresh and developing new day courses, but also retiring some of the older ones. And these have been very popular. And in fact, what we hadn't expected is there would be demand outside the British Library from other organisations, people saying, oh, we'd love to have something like this where we are. So we have been looking at ways that we could maybe offer some of this training outside as well as inside, but as yet that's to be confirmed. I thought I would talk a bit about some initiatives, some of which I've been involved in and some of which are colleagues' projects. Wasn't sure whether people here will have seen the georeferencer project. This is not just the British Library, this is the British Library in partnership with other map collections around the world and a company called Clocken. What we've done, I appreciate I've probably got quite a lot on this slide. What it does is it takes digitised maps and then overlays it on Google Earth and Google Maps. So I'm going to be brave and go to the website and hopefully show you some of this. So my colleague Kimberly Cowell manages this. We're now on our fourth round. The first time we did this was a bit of an experiment, and it went so well. We tweeted about it in our team, and all of the maps were georeferenced before the press release went out. So the team I'm in, we did get into a bit of trouble over this, but that kind of shows the success. So I will just show you.
Welcome to Georeferencer. On the left side is a picture of an old map, and on the right side is the up-to-date online map. The process of georeferencing is very simple. Just find the same place on both maps, click on this place in the left screen and then in the right screen. After assigning at least 3 control points, the system automatically calculates the georeference and places the picture over the base map. If any mistakes are made, it is always possible to change the control points manually. The image can also appear on the correct location in Google Earth as a 3D picture overlaying the terrain. Included within Georeferencer is the Map Analyst visualization tool, allowing us to see how and where the original map was not accurate. Let's have a try.
I think with any crowdsourcing project, people say, oh, if you have members of the public doing these tasks for you, how can you rely on the accuracy? But I must say we had very low rate of inaccuracies, and no one has tried to sabotage the georeferencer yet. So certainly we find this a very valuable project, and we in fact our map curators are always hunting through collections looking for more content to put up. We're having to kind of, we call it feeding the machine. There's now such such a demand in the kind of map circles for people wanting to georeference our maps. We're having to work hard to kind of feed enough maps into it. I thought we'd talk a bit about Europeana, and I have met someone here this morning already who works for Europeana. I thought I would talk firstly a little bit about the roadshows, quite selfishly because I've been on 2 of these roadshows and this is something I've been involved in. With the Europeana 1914-1918 roadshows, this is a very different style of project for the British Library because it was inviting members of the public to bring along items that they owned and digitise them and then upload the digitised images to the Europeana website. So this type of outreach is not something that the British Library would normally do because, like I say, it's people's objects rather than the library's objects. But this was really fun. So we weren't the only ones to be doing this. This was in partnership with many libraries across Europe. On the continent, and I'm sure people in this room, if you've been involved in this, many of the roadshows were held in national libraries. But in the UK, I think it was felt that we could be too London-centric if we had it in London, and it would be nice to get out to museums in different parts of the country, especially in military areas where there's military bases, and it was felt that people might have lots of interesting stories and items to bring. So we had one at the Museum of Lancashire in Preston in 2012. And we actually took more than 2,000 images on the day. So we set up a pop-up digitisation studio in the museum, and I worked in there all day, and I must say we were there from the start of the day to the end of the day, digitising like crazy. And people brought in all sorts of wonderful items, autograph books, cartoons, trench art, as well as all the letters and diaries and medals that you would expect. And I've just put a few photos here on. To this side of me, there's some trench art, and the other side there's a handkerchief, and it's a handkerchief with music printed on, but all sorts of wonderful items, and you can go on the Europeana website and look at these. And this is also with another Europeana 1914-1918 project, which is mass digitising National Library collections relating to the First World War, and we've been doing a lot of work on this, and this has now also been added onto the Europeana website. And I've put in here, as I mentioned, this is not just us going it alone, this is across Europeana. I'm going to talk a bit about Off the Map, because Off the Map is my pet project in many ways, and it's a partnership that the library has with a video game festival called Game City and a video game company called Crytek, and this is the logo that we've got for the 2014 competition, but I'll talk a little bit about last year's. Sometimes people say, Stella, why are you working with a video game company and a video game festival? And it's all really because I went to a digital preservation event a couple of years ago, and it was about the preservation of complex objects. So I mentioned a little bit earlier about preserving websites and preserving emails, but there's also obviously work going on looking at preserving games, preserving virtual worlds, and preserving animation. So I went to this digital preservation event and got talking to a few people there, and it really got me thinking about maybe what the library could do in this area. This is a photo. I don't know whether people here have been to Bradford in the UK and gone to the National Media Museum. It used to be called the Museum of Film and Photography. At the National Media Museum there's a permanent display of video games and arcade games, and you can go and play them. They started it off as a kind of temporary exhibit, and it's been so popular they've turned it into a permanent display. So I thought, if they've got this, I don't want to duplicate what they're doing at the British Library. That's not really in our remit. They've got a collection of games there, but what can I do? I also looked at what was happening in other institutions, and at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, recently they've had a games designer in residence making a game based on William Morris wallpaper patterns. And so Sophia George, she won a BAFTA student competition in games design. She's from Dundee, at the University in Dundee, and so she's making this wonderful William Morris game, and she's had open studio sessions at the V&A, so you can go and see her work in process. So video games are kind of getting a bit more respectable in the kind of cultural heritage arena. My first dabbling in the Web Archive, we can create special collections. The Web Archive itself can be a little bit complicated to work out how to use, so we're always looking at ways to try and make content more easily to discover for users. So we create thematic collections, and you can browse these, and in fact in the image you might just be able to read some of the ones in the middle. We've got a collection on the British countryside and one on Cornwall, but I did one on video game culture, and that was just a quick project to kind of see if there was some interest. And I welcome nominations, so people could nominate sites to me that they thought the British Library should be archiving. So that then led on to other things. This slide is from the game Crisis by Crytek, and Crytek have got a studio in Nottingham, quite a large studio, which is very near to the Game City Festival offices. And Crytek and Game City work together quite a lot on projects. And they had tried to run a competition previously, but without any unifying theme. So basically it was challenging student video game designers to create something, but it wasn't themed. So then Game City and Crytek approached the British Library saying, would you be involved in our competition? Sorry. Can we use your content? So we went away and thought about this. Now, I could have put in lots of slides of all the ideas that we brainstormed that we actually didn't use. So myself and my colleagues in our maps department went a bit crazy with this idea, and we started pulling out maps of the moon, maps of utopia, all sorts of wonderful things. But then we quickly learnt that working with people in this industry, you need something more detailed and more focused and more manageable. So we then came up with, this was for 2013, we ran the first competition. We offered content on Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza in Egypt, and London, 17th century London before the Great Fire. So I'll just show. And this is some of the content that we gave them. So this wonderful view of London Bridge by Vischer from 1616. Sorry if I said that wrong. And we've got John Leake's map here, which is from the Crace collection. And in fact you can see London burning in the top here. There was much more content, but I just wanted to show a few things. So this is our digitised content that we provided in asset packs to the students. And I've got the winning team here. I don't know whether people have seen the clip yet. So the winning team chose London, and from the content, the digitised content that we provided to them, they made a really nice, explorable environment from our information. So I will show a bit of a video.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I was recently approached by the lovely folks over...
There we go. I'm going to skip through to 50 seconds. So the students, this is a fly-through, but it includes some of their preparatory sketches. They went on a field trip to York to understand what the streets look like there. In a few seconds you'll get a fly-through, here we go, of what they've created using Crytek software. I should mention, Crytek provide their game engine software free of charge for educational use. So that's why they were one of the partners in this. And they're also interested in how architects, town planners, historians, all sorts of other people that might not use game engine software might want to use this. So this is the winning entry. I'll let it play a few minutes. what it did do, it did get picked up by the press quite a bit, including BBC, which over the weekend has a programme called which is all about technology. And we've got 5 minutes on BBC Click, which I think has got to be the highlight of my career so far, getting 5 minutes on BBC Click about off the map. I think I'll let it play until it gets to near a church and you see reflections on the windows. But what you have to think is that this was created by 6 undergraduates in their second year. And this has not been created by vast studios of professional developers. I was also quite surprised when this was being featured in the newspapers and on the blogs and things, people were contacting the library asking if we were going to make resources based on this, which is not something I've thought about. Could be a direction that we might take us in. There's all sorts of potential. And I did invite the students who created it to come and give a tour at the British Library to explain how they created it. And it was really interesting to create such a vast area. They were telling me that they'd made the houses in the streets in a modular fashion so that they could then put them into different patterns and create such a vast area. But it was really fascinating hearing about how they'd done that. So with the success of last year's competition, I've launched one for this year, and the library's having a Gothic literature exhibition in the autumn. So if you're back in the UK, for those of you outside the UK, if you're back here in the autumn or early spring, there's going to be a wonderful Gothic exhibition. And I've chosen 3 sub-themes for the students, which are Fonthill Abbey, which was a home of the author William Beckford, and it was a preposterous building, and the tower fell down twice, and now there's not even a ruin of this building. It completely collapsed. But in the library we've got volumes of architectural plans, and we've got drawings, so really, really beautifully illustrated drawings of the interior. So we're really hoping that someone will recreate Fonthill Abbey in a digital form. And we've also chosen a fictional theme, Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of the Red Death, and we've chosen Whitby and obviously the associations with Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. So I've been a bit braver than last year, and I've given them more than maps. I've given them some rather wonderful book illustrations, and this is an illustration from Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of the Red Death. It's great because the book itself is out of copyright and you can get it on Project Gutenberg. People were saying, "Oh, can you expect non-literature students to read a story?" And I'm like, "Well, what's so wrong with that? It's only 41 pages long. It's freely available. I think we can definitely ask them to do that." But I've also provided them with some quite traditional content. So this is a sea chart of the harbour and the coastline near Whitby. So that's just one of the things that we're doing with some of our digital content. I should also mention sounds, and many people don't realise that there's a vast sound archive at the British Library. And what I learnt from running off the map last year is that copyright, there seems to be lots of misunderstanding over copyright, and especially over copyright of audio, and some of the students were submitting work and flouting copyright with the audio tracks that they'd put on. So I thought to avoid that problem I would make lots of audio from the library's collections available to the students, and I've got some wonderful sound effects, creaky gates, rain, storms, but also some pieces of classical music that I had digitised from the vinyl. Again, I was trying to provide everything out of copyright for them to use. And I was actually given permission in the library to make all of this content to the students as public domain. So again, if people outside of Off the Map wanted to use this content or do something fun, it's freely available to do that. The students actually come in as well to the library. We don't make them, but they've got so passionate about the project. I've been organising show and tell sessions for them to actually come in, meet curators, see the items. And I had so many students visit at the last one. More students came than what had booked. I had to go and fetch a lot of extra chairs. I was kind of overwhelmed really by how many of them wanted to actually come in and engage with the content. And in terms of outreach and working with new audiences, previously in the library I'd had colleagues say, oh, video game designers don't want to work with our collections, they're not interested in that. But I think this project in many ways has proved them wrong. If I've got time, I might show a clip of one of the projects that one of the student teams has been working on at the moment. I'll show a few, and because they've been using the sound effects, and it's really quite interesting. My colleague Cheryl Tipp, who's the curator of our natural sounds collection, when I showed her this, she was like, "Oh, they're using our sound collections." There's some thunder coming up. So this is a work in progress. We've been encouraging the students to blog and to upload clips to YouTube so we can see what they're working on. It's okay, I'll get a glass of water while this plays a minute. Dark, but they're imagining going underneath Whitley Abbey. I'll just stop that. But yeah, so you can see obviously what they're doing there, and again that's from the library's content. I thought I'd also mention an exhibition that's only just recently closed at the library that the digital research team co-curated with our science team, and that's all been on data visualisation. And again, this is quite a new thing for the library to do. Most of our exhibitions traditionally focus on quite traditional subject matter and historical collections, but this one was all really about data visualisation, but also showing it's not a new thing. So we tried to include some historic items from the collections. So I've got William Farr's cholera mortality map from 1852. So we've had items like this on display alongside more modern items. I had to have one of my colleagues explain this to me. This is from a collection called The Circles of Life, and it's looking at how similar human DNA is to different animals. And so this one here is an ape, but the other ones that we've had on display, we've had a platypus, and the human DNA, I must say, is very, very different from the platypus. But these have been on display in the library. Some of them have been interactive and some of them have been static. Some of them we've had the physical item on display, and in other cases we've had touch screens for people to play around with. And I must say that this has been really a successful exhibition in the library, and we're hoping to evaluate from this and again hopefully put on similar displays in the future. I've mentioned in my opening that we've got 150 million plus items. One of the collections that we've got that's digitised is what we call the 19th century books, or sometimes we call them the Microsoft books. And if you've seen Ali present before, he may have talked about these. This was a collection of books that we digitised with Microsoft. I think when they were still exploring whether they wanted to be in the book digitisation market, like what Google is, but that project then, Microsoft pulled out of that project, but what it meant is that we were left with a collection of 68,000 digitised books that we could make public domain and do lots of experimental projects with. So this is where the mechanical curator came from, which I'm not going to mention too much about because Ben's coming in on Friday. But if for those of you who might not be here on Friday, what Ben did is Ben wrote a script to separate the illustrations from the text, and then he created a Tumblr account so that every hour on Tumblr a new image would be displayed, and then we went wild and crazy, and in our team we got control of the library's Flickr account from our marketing colleagues because we appreciated that the library had a Flickr account for quite some time but it wasn't actually putting anything on it, and we were thinking, well, we've got this vast collection, it's all public domain, people can do something cool with it, let's put it on Flickr, and again I think a bit like my Off the Map project, we were quite shocked at I suppose how well people appreciated this, and people started creating their own apps or using the content with their own tools. So I don't know if people here have seen Mia Ridge speak before. Mia is actually one of our trainers on our training course. She teaches the data visualisation and also the crowdsourcing modules. But Mia used to work at the Science Museum in London, and she's got this game, an online game, where you pretend to be a curator and you tag things. So Mia has done this with Science Museum collections, but then when we released the Flickr images, she was like, oh, that's perfect for the Dora game. So we've also had people making skateboards and then tweeting about it. So this is a skateboard with an image from the 19th century book illustrations. Sadly, the skateboard was meant to be posted to the British Library, but there was a mix-up and it got sent to another museum instead in the States. So they've got the British Library illustrated skateboard and we don't. But we've got a photograph of it, so that's almost as good, I suppose. So I'm now going to talk a bit about British Library Labs. British Library Labs was set up 2 years ago, and it's an initiative funded by the Andrew Mellon Foundation. And really what we've been doing is we've recognised that there's quite a few institutions setting up digital labs, and we thought, hey, we want one of those at the British Library. And one of the main activities of labs is to hold competitions, and this is an ideal way of researchers coming forward and to tell us what they want to do with our collections and for us to work with them. So last year we had a competition, and I just thought I'd mention the winners from last year. So Peter Francois from the University of Oxford, he's interested in travel, and he researches historical material relating to travel, and he was interested in the 68,000 19th century books, but he's only interested in the books about travel. So he's worked with us to create what he's called the sample generator, so that he could pull out thematic subsections from that resource to then use in his research. I must say, on my opening slide there was a link to the Digital Scholarship blog at the library, so if I met any of the things I mentioned, whether it's the georeferencer, whether it's the BL Labs competitions, whether it's Off the Map, there are quite a lot of blog posts about these projects in the library's Digital Scholarship blog. Another winner, we have two winners each year, was Dan Norton from the University of Dundee, and he's also been Artist in Residence at the Hanger Centre for Art and Research in Barcelona. And we call him DJ Dan because Dan is a DJ, and his research is looking at taking methodologies, DJing methodologies, and applying it to cultural heritage and library content. So that's what Dan was working on with us. But we've had a new competition, and the closing date has been recently, so we thought that this conference would be a really nice opportunity to announce the winners of this year's competition. Sadly, the winners can't be here in person, but in a kind of a BAFTA award ceremony style, I've got some videos that they've prepared of them talking about their projects. And sadly I don't have a drum roll audio effect, which is a bit of a failing on my part. But we've got two competition winners. The first project is Desmond Schmidt and Anna Gerber from the University of Queensland, and their project is the text-to-image linking tool, which is called Tilt. And the second winner is the Victorian Meme Machine, which is by Bob Nicholson of Edge Hill University in Birmingham in the UK. So I've just put up the profiles this is first Desmond. His background is in Greek papyrology, I hope I said that right, but also in IT, and he's a research scientist at Queensland University of Technology. And his colleague is Anna. She's a software developer and technical project manager. She's worked on all sorts of interesting projects, which I'm sure people here are probably aware of. But I will give a brief description, but really I'm going to let them talk for themselves in the video. So really, this is a project to work with digitised material, and the problem that they've identified is basically trying to line up transcriptions and annotations with the text in the digitised image. So there's an illustration which I appreciate might be a bit fuzzy blown up like this, but really it's trying to align up these activities with the right places on the digitised item. Now obviously with regular printed material this is not so much of an issue, but with manuscript material or very complicated material this is quite a problem. So we thought that the project that they're working on with this, if they manage to crack this problem, then the outcome could be of benefit to lots of other researchers and institutions. So the videos are not online yet because I was explaining to people here earlier, we haven't put them on YouTube yet because I've only just announced the winners now, and if we'd have put them on YouTube people might have found them and started tweeting links to them, so we've had to keep it a little bit hush hush. So, but they will be.
Hi, I'm Desmond Schmidt and I'm a researcher at the Queensland University of Technology.
And I'm Anna Gerber and I'm a developer in the IEEE research group at the University of Queensland, Australia. Our entry to the British Library Labs competition is the text-to-image alignment tool, TILT. Many digital humanities collections contain images of manuscripts and early printed books, and we want to make these more accessible over the web. To achieve this, we're aiming to develop a web app with the user interface for creating links from those digital facsimiles to transcriptions of their content.
We realise that this has been attempted before, but we are going to do things a bit differently. First, we are going to automate the creation of the links, and then we are going to store them separately from the text, and just add them when the user views a page. That way the text can stay plain and be easy to update.
So they're our first winners. Oh. Sorry. And our second winner, Bob Nicholson, so he's a historian specialising in 19th century Britain and America, and when we first saw his proposal we weren't quite sure whether to take it seriously or not, but then when we read through it in more detail we thought there might actually be something really quite interested in this. So his project will be working with the 19th century newspaper collections. And it's got a very snazzy title, we like this, the Victorian Meme Machine, and it's really looking at humour in the past and whether jokes in previous time periods are funny today. How can we identify them? How can we get a machine to identify them? And what would people's reactions be when say treating them like online jokes that we share today on Facebook and Twitter and social media? So it's going to create a joke database of Victorian jokes, which we're actually really looking forward to, and we think this is going to be quite fun. And I will show you his video because.
Hi, my name is Dr. Bob Nicholson, and I'm a lecturer in history at Edge Hill University. I work on the history of Victorian popular culture. Lately I've been roaming around in the rather strange world of Victorian jokes. Whenever I tell people that I work on this, they always get this slightly puzzled look on their face, because I think we tend to assume that the Victorians don't really do humour, that these were a people who were permanently not amused. But this actually couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, millions upon millions of jokes were written and told in this period, and some of them are even quite funny, but they've all been forgotten. So I applied to the British Library Labs competition because I wanted their help to find these jokes hidden in the library's collections and bring them back to life. So for the next few months we're going to be working together on a new project we're calling the Victorian Meme Machine, and here is how it's going to work. First, we'll extract jokes from the library's digital collections using a range of automatic and manual methods. These will be combined into a database, which will then be fed into the meme machine. This will look to pair the jokes with an appropriate image. When it finds one, the joke will be superimposed onto the image, creating the meme. These new memes will then be released into the wild over social media. We'll keep an eye on which, if any, go viral and reprogram the machine accordingly. Over time, hopefully, it'll develop a good sense of humour.
I thought you'd like that. So really, that's what I've got. I wasn't quite sure how long that would go for, and I appreciate I started a bit before 10:30. But really, I just wanted, if people have got questions on any of what I've spoken about, or if there's other British Library digital projects you want to know more about, I'm happy to take questions. And also, I just wanted to mention that I'm happy to talk to people over the coffee break and over the lunch break. And if there's anything you want to ask me about what we're doing, or if people are working on collaborative projects and they want to discuss ideas with me, then that's also really cool as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Stella, for this broad display of activities of the British Library. Are there any questions for Stella?
Yes, it's on. Hello. So I've done a lot of work with digitized books, mainly through the Internet Archive. And one of the things, of course, that we find is that the OCR is really not very good. So have you any projects to try to correct that, to try to make it so that these books actually read like books when you're reading the text?
With some of the collections, we have re-OCR'd them from previous attempts. I do appreciate that that is an issue. That's not something that I've been working on in the team at the moment. Is that sounding okay? I had a bit of a buzz. What we have been finding with the 19th century book collections, it's actually been working pretty well, and we've not been having a problem with that with that specific collection, but I appreciate with other material there could be, and there's a collection of theatrical material at the moment which I've been looking at where the OCR has not been great, because it's obviously with like playbill material where it's all in different fonts and at different parts of the page and very, very tricky. So we are kind of looking at what we might want to do with that, but we appreciate the New York Public Library have got a great site called Ensemble where in crowdsourcing the transcription of that type of material. So we are looking at that with interest and wondering whether that could be applied to some of our content too. But I agree, the OCR quality is an issue. Yeah.
That's a question over there.
So who ultimately owns the content that comes out of these competitions? I'm looking at the Victorian memes and immediately picturing a greeting card company appropriating all of those and making silly birthday cards. What are you doing to make to profit from this, quite frankly, or to make sure that others who profit from it are still giving back to you?
That is a very good question, and with the Flickr release, so with the images on Flickr, and I'm sure Ben will talk more about this on Friday, people have been saying, oh, but what if people start profiting and you're not profiting? People might start manufacturing things, and for us, with that set of content, we're like, look, people are free to do whatever they want with it. If they make some money from it, great, because then we can say we're stimulating the economy, and that and that creative industries. So if the person who made that skateboard then suddenly started mass producing those skateboards and selling them, we could say, well, they've been inspired by the British Library, they've designed this item, it's gone to market, it's generating business. So we're not actually seeing that as a bad thing, we're seeing it as an opportunity. But I do appreciate with the collection that we put on Flickr, we were freely able to do that, and obviously with other collection types then that becomes a bit more problematic, especially if they've been digitised as part of commercial arrangements. It becomes a bit complicated. With the Victorian meme machine, I honestly don't know. I will have to check with Bob what the situation there is, because you're right, once the jokes are actually on the images, you've created something new entirely, and like I say, our plan is to just push them out there. I will have to check. With my Off the Map competition and the output of the students' work, we've let them all keep their own IP. And we thought that was actually quite important, to let them have the IP for their creations. We did have long discussions about whether we should have it as the library, but we have let them keep that. They're saying that Crytek only make their software available for free for educational use, so if the students were actually to release their games and start selling it on Steam or something like that, then they would have to license from Crytek to be able to do that. So that's a complication a little bit with the games produced in Off the Map. But yes, that's a really relevant and topical issue, and every time we do something we have a little bit of a debate of what the implications are. But certainly at the moment, if people start having successful business ideas, then we're thinking great. We also have a festival each year at the library, an in-person festival in March called Spring Fest, and sometimes we even have what looks like a little bit like a craft fair at the front of the library in the piazza area, and designers have stalls often selling the things that they've made based on British Library material. So often that's kind of ceramics designers and furniture designers and textile designers, but we really do try to kind of celebrate what the creative industry is, whether it's a video game designer or whether it's a furniture maker might have made inspired by our content, and so that's not seen as a bad thing at all. I should probably just add, we have been in discussion with the British Library shop as well, not wanting to keep them out of this, and certainly with the Flickr collections, we have been having conversations with them. So obviously, if there is content in there that they want to have as items produced and sold, and the British Library shop have really upped their game. They're on social media now. They're tweeting. They send some quite amusing emails if you're on the email distribution list of the British Library shop. So if you're not, I should urge you to check it out. They really do have some quite fun things. At the moment there's a comics exhibition on at the library, so there's all sorts of wonderful comic related items in the shop, and then it will be Gothic in the year. Sorry for the advertising plug.
Okay, another question over here.
Could you say a little bit more, please, about the scope of the UK Web Archive? Will the Elag2014 website be archived as well?
Oh, I guess it depends on the domain name. We are. Again, this is a tricky issue. Obviously, anything that ends in kind of .uk is easy to identify and easy to hoover up. But when you've got content hosted elsewhere that's about the UK, or I suppose, like you say, global information about, or I was just thinking, where's the website hosted for Elag?
It's a WordPress blog with a paid-for domain name .org for the duration of the year.
I can check. It's not an exact science, and so sometimes we have to kind of tell the crawlers to pick things up. Yeah, it's because obviously we can't take in, the legislation means that we can't take in the whole of the web, just the UK part of the web. But we do definitely take in blogs and social media accounts. But if they're not easily identifiable, we have to manually go in. We have a web archive curation tool, and curators will do selection work, as a bit like how we'd select monographs or journals or anything else, and we'll basically instruct the crawlers to pick things up. So there's quite a bit more manual intervention sometimes under the bonnet of the Web Archive than people imagine. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? There's one there.
I'll go Claire.
I was wondering, with some of the tools you're developing, like the map georeferencing, obviously there's a lot of other libraries in the UK and elsewhere that have map collections. We don't necessarily have the software development to be able to replicate that kind of thing. Are you going to look at either making the software available or allowing people to add other maps from other collections to the tool?
That is happening. With that project, it's a consortium project, and it's had beta testing. So the National Library of Scotland were actually the first institution to put their maps on the georeferencer. So Clocken have made the technology for the georeferencer, and it's a consortium with various partners. National Library of Scotland made their maps available first, but they didn't promote them on social media, so it didn't have. It took quite a while to get them georeferenced, and it didn't really make a big impact, I think, because people didn't know it was there. And I think people now have started to associate the georeferencer project with the British Library, because we tweeted about it and blogged about it, and it got some interest. So people have been thinking it's just a British Library project, which it isn't. I think University of Portsmouth, if I go on to the... So very much so. So other map collections are putting their collections on there, and I'm sure if you spoke to the consortium, in fact it might tell me on... I can send you more information if you are interested in this, and Kimberly Carroll at the British Library and Chris Lees at National Library of Scotland, they speak widely on the georeference project and have lots of information. But no, certainly we're definitely not keeping it to ourselves, and really I think it's seeing the more maps that are put up on there, the better really. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. More questions? No?